Değerli konuklarımız, kıymetli misafirler, öğleden önceki açış konuşmaları tamamlandı. Şimdi artık şu andan itibaren akşam kongrenin ilk günü tamamlanana kadar ağırlıklı olarak oturumlarla devam edecek programımız. Ve şimdi birbirinden değerli isimleri ağırlamaya başlayacağız. Şu anda benim hali hazırda bulunduğum sahnede. Bu arada yine bir hemen hatırlatma yapalım. Sizin de değerli konuşmacılarımıza sorularınız olur ise bu soruları panel boyunca Slido'nun uygulaması ve web sitesi üzerinden A Salonu TSPK etiketiyle @A-Salonu TSPK etiketiyle bu salondaki panelistlerimize iletebiliyorsunuz sorularınızı. Moderatörlerimiz soru cevaplar için yeterli zaman olması durumunda sorularınızı konuşmacılarımıza yöneltecekler. İlk panelimizin başlığı Finans Merkezine Dönüşüm Hikayesi olacak ve bu başlık altında alternatif şehirler, mali piyasalara neler sunuyorlar, teşvikler, altyapı, beşeri sermaye ve sosyal hayat avantajları nelerdir? Finans merkezi olmak bir ülkeye değer katıyor mu? Katıyorsa nasıl bir değer katıyor? Uluslararası finans merkezleri arası eşgüdümün getireceği fırsatlar nelerdir? Finans merkezi olmak için Türkiye özelinde, İstanbul özelinde hangi yön ön plana çıkartılmalıdır? Ve İstanbul'un bu anlamda potansiyeli nedir? Ve hali hazırda uygulamakta olduğu, finans merkezi olmak için uygulamakta olduğu strateji nedir? Bu başlıkları konuşacağız efendim. Ve şimdi ben oturumu yönetmek üzere, moderatörlüğünü yapmak üzere Bloomberg Piyasa Yapısı ve Stratejisi Direktörü Sayın Mark Howarth'ı sahneye davet etmek istiyorum. Mr. Howarth, would you please? Thank you very much. Konuşmacılarımız ise efendim, Luban Uluslararası İş ve Finans Merkezi CEO'su Sayın Farah Jaafar-Crossby. Mrs. Crossby, would you please? Thank you very much. Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Cumhurbaşkanlığı Finans Ofisi İstanbul Finans Merkezi Daire Başkanı Sayın Doktor Serkan Yüksel. Sayın Yüksel, buyurunuz efendim lütfen. Çok teşekkür ediyorum. Ve Katar Finans Merkezi CEO'su ve Yönetim Kurulu üyesi Sayın Yousuf Al-Jaida. Buyurunuz. Mr. Jaida, would you please? Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I wish you a very successful session. Thank you.
I hope so. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming to the first of the panel sessions today. We've heard this morning about methods of transformation and some of the ideas and the projects that can be used in transforming an economy. We're going to talk in this first panel about the transformation of a city into a financial center, and we'll explore whether it is some of those advanced products, advanced digital techniques that we have heard about already, or whether it's some more fundamental items. I'm going to ask my panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll get straight into it. So I can start with you, Farah.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Farah, or in Turkish it's Farah, I've been told. And I represent Labuan International Business and Financial Center. I run the market development unit of that center as a wholly owned subsidiary of the regulator, Labuan Financial Services Authority. Thank you.
Hi, good morning everyone. I am Serkan Yüksel from Presidency Finance Office. I am the head of the Istanbul Finance Center Project Department. As you already know, in 2018, with the first decade, the new offices has been established, and Finance Office is one of the 4 offices.
Assalamu alaikum, marhaba. My name is Yousuf Al-Jaida. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Qatar Financial Center. I've been in this role for the past 4 years, and I've been in the Qatar Financial Center for more than 9 years now. And I'm happy to be in Istanbul and share my experiences.
Great. Thank you. And I'm Mark Howarth. I'm from Bloomberg in London, and I look after our market structure and strategy in Europe. We heard earlier about some of the high-tech future that is available to us. We're going to start with a relatively low-tech option at the moment and just take a sense of a poll in the room with hands up. The question is, what, in your view, is the top driver of a successful financial center? I've got 5 options for you. Infrastructure, tax policy, the range of institutions that are present, the legal system, social life. So let's just put a show of hands up there. Infrastructure. Is this the most important driver of a successful financial center. Anybody agree? No? Okay, it was one. There was a couple of hardy people there from the construction industry, I suspect. Tax policy. A few more. The range of institutions which are present in the financial center. Okay, picking up some more there. The range of legal services, or the legal structure that is present. A few. And the social environment, the social life, and the other attributes. Okay, a couple of party animals at the back there for us. All right, so I think on balance, although it was, I think, fairly close, obviously in the UK we're very experienced with polls coming out without a clear view, but range of institutions present, I think, and perhaps we'll pick that up later. But let's start, Farah, with a slightly more broader question. What's the function of a financial center? What should its broad goals be?
To intermediate financial services. It's really quite simple. I think if you look at a financial center or an international financial center as an intermediation center, or almost as if like the plumbing of global finance, then you can see that really it's a wholesale environment that you're looking at. The retail environment sits very much in the domestic market, but when you broach into the international aspect of it, what you need to be cognizant of is that it's a wholesale center, first and foremost, and secondly, it needs to be able to ease friction, whether it be legal friction, fiscal or tax friction, and regulatory friction. And when I talk about regulatory friction, I think the biggest mistake is to assume that in certain centers there is lack of regulation or there is a different form of regulatory stance. That's not true. It's about proportionality of that regulation. So I think the objectives are very clear. What's important is to understand that what is the aim of that center, I guess.
So you have a financial center. It's going very well. Do you agree with that as the primary function?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with most of what Farah said, but I think each nation has its own goals when it comes to building their own financial center. I can speak from my experience in the state of Qatar. We started early in 2005, and back then our main goal was to diversify the economy away from oil and gas. So one of the main objectives of our financial center was to first attract foreign direct investment into the country, to create more high-skilled jobs in the country, to develop the local financial services industry, and that's a subject that I think we as financial centers get criticized a lot for, because obviously there's other players developing also the financial services industry. Myself and Farah were talking earlier, I think we share the same challenges because we have to deal with the local regulators, that being the central bank, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Trade, and each one of those has a role of developing certain sectors, and especially financial services when it comes to the central banks and the Ministry of Finance. But developing the local financial services industry is a big one, because the legal environment usually interacts with the local regulators. You're basically attracting firms to establish in the financial center, and those firms tend to interact with the local economy. So there's jobs also being created through these financial companies who eventually have an impact on the local environment. But one more, I think, objective which is very important is being laboratories for policy change. I mean, that's one aspect that we've been very successful with. Usually, governments are shy sometimes in terms of rolling out certain policies when it comes to, let's say, liberalizing certain aspects of your economy. So, you know, some of the experiences we had to deal with back in the day was that the government would use the financial center to gauge for a certain policy, see how it works. I mean, a simple example on that would be our entire freedom of entry and exit of expat workers into the country. We were a laboratory to allow that before the state. I mean, 15 years back, there was quite a restriction in terms of, the procedure required for a foreign expat worker to be working in the country. We had the sponsorship law, and the financial center abolished the sponsorship law, abolished the exit permit, 15 years before the government did that. So we were used for a certain experiment, which the government eventually rolled out and implemented as a national policy. So I think it's important. We're laboratories for policy change, multiple policies. And then last but not least, of course, is minimizing bureaucracy to the maximum extent possible. I mean, because we have our own sets of laws and rules and regulations, and it's usually easier to enact a law within a financial center versus going through a parliamentary process, perhaps for, even something as simple as changing financial regulation. I think we get the benefit to do that within the financial center, simpler, more efficient, and in a quicker manner. So all of this put together, I think, is objectives for the overall country, which starts within the financial center and contributes to the greater good of the nation. So that was, that's our experience, but mainly attract foreign direct investment and high-skilled labor is the two biggest ones for the state of Qatar, and we've been very successful on that. We've created 10,000 jobs of high-skilled labor in the country, where the allocation of population in a country like Qatar is 87% of blue-collar labor versus only 13%, and we contribute to that 13% in a big way.
Serkan, does that fit with your goals for Istanbul?
Yeah, definitely. Just to add a minor point to Mr. Yousuf's excellent explanation, to be like legislative underground for the financial center is the driving force, but also at the same time it's like an ecosystem. It's creating positive externality to finance because you're bringing into many different financial institutions into the cluster. So it's creating a new horizon, as a matter of fact. So as a representative from Istanbul Finance Center, we are, we have not been settled yet. We are on the process, and we are hopefully will be finishing up our Istanbul Finance Center project construction business in year 2022, at least end of 21, beginning of 22, and we will, I think, go through the same processes, and we believe we will have the similar versions of it. But every country, every city has its ingredients, and we will go all to do the comparative advantages to do Istanbul.
So just pick up one of the points that you made, that part of one of the values of QFC has been this ability to create a laboratory for new laws, new ideas, new rules, and to test them out in a microcosm of the country. Is that something that you've been able to do?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at Malaysia and Malaysia's position as an Islamic finance center, the beginning of Islamic finance in Malaysia was in Labuan. The first sukuk that was issued was in Labuan, and then it was used as a test bed, and after which it moved onshore as the Malaysian Islamic Financial Initiative. So yes, it's a fantastic petri dish for what needs doing for the country as a whole. But aside from the FDI, I just want to offer an alternative view with regards to how Labuan came about. We've been around for 30 years. Yeah, and we didn't actually start out wanting to attract FDI. We started out trying to protect Malaysian companies leaving Malaysia, because we knew as Malaysian companies grew, they would need an intermediation center. So instead of going to other centers within the region, we created our own. And so even though we've been around for 30 years, a lot of you might only have heard of us for the last 10. Because for the first 20, we were just focused very much on our internal business going out. So again, to go back to what you said earlier, different jurisdictions in different countries set up these centers for different reasons. Of late, a lot of it is about FDI, but it could be, in the case of Labuan, for example, just a domestic need that kind of has grown into something much larger than that. Okay. And just to add the petri dish, and to talk about the digital aspect of it. So because we've been around for 30 years, we have a lot of different, we're a full-fledged jurisdiction, which means we have everything from a payment gateway license to an investment banking license to a money broking license. And a lot of these licenses were legacy licenses that nobody used until about 3 years ago. So now we start to use these licenses for digital requirements, like crypto exchanges, for example. And our approach towards that, again, is like a petri dish. We have taken the approach that there is no sandboxing, everything will be licensed, but we can do that because we're in a wholesale environment. So again, it's a little bit of a test bed, as you were. So yeah, just to share that bit as well.
Okay. So Yousuf, further to that, and you talked about one of the outcomes of QFC has been something of an increase in FDI, an increase in the rate of higher paid, higher skilled jobs, and really a bit of driver for an economic transformation away from a certain economic sector, energy in your case, into a more diverse thing. Do you think that that's so specific that each financial center is driven by its own thing, or are there general rules whether you can say where a financial center adds value to an economy for any financial center?
No, I think each financial center, I think, has its own niche, which not only feeds into the local economy, but spreads out into the regional economy in certain instances. I mean, we admire the Malaysians and what they've done in Islamic finance, for example, and that's one modern developed example that we look towards. But in the Qatar Financial Center aspect, I mean, these are developing experiments. I mean, we've started out early in 2005 exactly like Labuan started out in an entirely offshore kind of structure. 3 years into the experiment, this thing turned into an onshore piece of infrastructure that's completely trying to integrate with the local economy. And it's been a springboard for not only FDI into the country, but we noticed that local companies are starting to use this to springboard into European markets and international markets all over the globe. So for example, our sovereign wealth fund is established in the financial center versus being established onshore. And the reason they've probably chosen the Qatar Financial Center is because it's under international law, and when they mingle and integrate with counterparts in other markets globally, they want to be recognized that they're coming from a well-regulated, recognized environment. So like I said, I mean, we've started offshore in 2005. In 2009, after the financial crisis, we've realized that a lot of the companies coming in are actually coming in, most of them, not all of them, most of them, I'd say 70% of the companies are coming in to basically participate in your markets. And here you're structured as an offshore center. Supposedly you're fenced, ring-fenced away from the local economy. But we've realized that a lot of these companies actually are coming to integrate and participate in your market. So in 2009, we introduced a tax environment, basically saying that if you want to do business in the local environment, then you're taxed, just like on par with other local companies, or else you'll have a tax arbitrage, of course, which is very destructive. So we've introduced a tax environment in 2009, and we've actually put a strategy together to attract more companies to participate in the local environment, and we had no issues with that. Certain financial centers have a huge issue with that. They don't want companies who are ring-fenced within the financial center to do anything with the local environment. But even with those restrictions, you'd appreciate and you'd realize that companies still want to participate in one way or another with the local environment. So, I mean, we don't have borders. Our financial center is virtual. Yeah. It's completely integrated into the local economy. You can have a company, an onshore company, a local established company, on one floor in a tower, with another legal environment one floor below, with a completely different kind of virtual environment under English common law in the same country. So, we've developed into this two legal system environment in one country, and now, as a matter of fact, we promote ourselves as an onshore financial center, even though the regulators don't like it, the Ministry of Finance doesn't like it, the central bank doesn't like it. They challenge it, and they would call us offshore. But the reality and the situation on the ground is that we have 750 companies today from various permitted activities. 85% of these companies have nothing to do with financial services, but they contribute in one way or another to the development of the financial. So, you got multitude of international lawyers, you got accountants, you got auditors. Recently, we got, tons of IT companies doing, fintech, and that's a whole different topic as well, fintech. I mean, certain financial centers have their own sandboxes, which is working and collaborating with the local regulators, and other financial centers just do it in a completely different way. I mean, and the way we've approached fintech is that we've allowed it as a permitted activity, non-regulated, up until the regulators get their act together and put a sandbox together. So, these things develop. They start out as something, and they can develop into a completely, entirely different creature.
Okay.
But again, for the benefit of the greater good.
Yeah.
So we've had this kind of evolution in structure, and now, I mean, 19 years into the experiment, it's one country, two legal systems.
Right.
Onshore, completely onshore.
Okay.
You can do business onshore.
Right. Well, I think I'll pick up some of those particular regulatory points. But second, how does that fit with your vision for Istanbul and the value it will bring to Turkey?
As a matter of fact, this is the question we ask ourselves. What should we emphasize on? And we just not ask to ourselves, but to the financial players in the country, also in the region. And as a matter of fact, this was one of the reasons the finance office has been structured as a sole, coordinator of the project. I think we take the role of, coordinating between the private and the public sector. We had organized workshops, meetings. Also, we had analysis and reports from consultants. And general conclusion for what we should emphasize is that we should create a story for the Istanbul. I mean, Istanbul has its own story, but for the finance, we need to clarify what we want to do, and that depends on the story. And that target, out of this whole conversation, we have reached that we need to catch up for the new horizons of the finance for the future, because to be honest, we are lagging behind other financial centers. I mean, our first mandate legislative history goes back to the year 2009, which is barely just 10 years. I mean, Labuan Finance Center, Kuala Lumpur has a 30 years of history, as QFC have more than 20 years, so we are just, catching up. And for the new horizons, we understand fintech, financial technologies will be a new thing. And we think we have a comparative advantage in that issue because we have a young population. Turkey is a huge economy. I mean, we are the 70th economy in general G20. And then there's a dynamic business environment in Istanbul, and we believe Turkish people have adaptive capacity to digest the new things, and the technology is a new phenomenon in the youngsters. As you know, the 30% of the population is 80% of the population is below 35 years old. So average age for the Istanbul is 31. So hence, we think for the new technology adaptation, we have some comparative advantage, and I believe we have a good coverage of production and trade and commerce and industry all together in Istanbul. So I think the first thing will be the fintech. We try to harvest better technological usage, and by utilizing new technology, we will be able to, rank up ourselves to the higher places. And secondly, we believe Islamic finance will be a new dimension for the finance in general, not for the Islamic countries or the geography of the Middle Eastern. Correct me if I'm wrong. In Malaysia, the Islamic finance funds has been owned by Chinese, like 30% or more than 30%?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so when we say Islamic finance, it's not for the Islamic countries. As a matter of fact, we want to change the terminology at the same time. We would like to call it participatory finance because, why we are calling it Islamic, I mean, we do respect religious aspects, but it's asset-based and asset-backed nature. So basically, the private equity, venture capital, crowdfunding could easily be in the sphere of the Islamic finance if we generalize the terminology to participatory finance, and we are working on that. And as in Istanbul, we have a cultural heritage for participatory finance. I mean, first legislative, maybe the latest legislative financial framework, Mecelle, has been written down in Istanbul. I mean, like 100 years ago. So if we, focus on that thing, I think we have a huge success potential out there. So for the other details, we can discuss later because I don't want to consume much time. I can speak all the day for about participatory finance, but I'll stop here.
Rein that back in a little bit. All right, so I'm going to narrow the scope down, but just before I do, we'll take audience Q&A a little bit later on, but just to remind everybody that we are running the Slido app, and so you can put questions in on that, and it'll pop up on my screen here, and I'll be able to put those questions to the panel for you if you wish, but I will come back and take questions from the floor in a few moments. I just wanted to narrow the scope down a little bit, Farah, and we've been talking obviously about the broad scope and the broad drive for financial centres, but there are already in existence many broad scope ones, Singapore, London, and to some extent. Does a centre that's coming into the marketplace today have to be specialised in some way, have to create or carve out a niche in order to be successful?
Well, there are two very distinct points I want to make on this. Number one, no man is an island. So no centre, so when Istanbul gets up and running, and I'm sure it will be soon enough, you can't operate on your own. Exactly. It's a partnership issue, and it's a partnership that's a global partnership. So other financial centers, we are very much, our mantra is we're in Asia, by Asian, for Asians. So for me to be in Istanbul is a fantastic opportunity because I don't fly out more than 6-7 hours actually out of KL. We're very focused in Asia, and there's a reason for that. The reason is, and there's a question that's relatable to that, okay? The question I get asked most is, why Labuan? Why not Singapore? Why not Hong Kong? And it's a very valid question, no? And the fact of the matter is, right, it's not about competition. Financial centers do not compete with each other at its core. They leverage off each other. If Singapore has not grown the way it's grown in the reinsurance segment, our captive insurance or self-insurance market, which is going gangbusters at the minute, would not grow. So it's important to understand that the mentality and the ethos of a financial center is not, it's for me. No, it's about the growth across the region, right? And that's why the challenges we have now in Hong Kong really will shrink the market in Asia, and it worries me. Because as Hong Kong grows, Singapore will grow, Labuan will grow. Everyone has its place, the same way every single person in this room has a place, right? Having said that, every single person, number one, leverages off each other, but number two, has a niche. So it's true, all centers need to have a niche. But it's important to understand that the niche has to be a natural niche. It has to be a niche that evolves really over time. And it has to be a niche that leverages off something else. So I go back to, let's say, a reinsurance center, right? Because there's a lot of friction in risk management. If you look at Bermuda, Bermuda is the largest reinsurance center in the world. And that is because it leverages off the US market. It is not about Bermudan-based risk, right? And so a niche is important, but a niche cannot be artificially created, I guess is my point.
Okay. So Serkan, every financial center has to identify its natural niche. What's the niche for Istanbul?
I mean, as a matter of fact, I explained it previously. It should be in participator finance and the fintech. That issues will be, or I mean, it's not as a matter of fact, it's a niche. I mean, QFC goes through the same process. I mean, Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, and Labuan all together doing the same thing. So to combine with what Ms. Sarah said, Farah. There is a competition in some sort of sense, but it's a collaborative competition.
Yeah.
I mean, without having a collaboration, I think that competition will be vogue. So we are trying to get connection with the QFC, and hopefully we are going to sign an MOU in upcoming days and we just came from the Malaysia.
Yes.
We had a meeting with the Labuan Finance Center and also the Kuala Lumpur Finance Center. We are trying to, catch up on some collaborative issues. Maybe, we may create a triangle between Qatar, Turkey, and Malaysia at the same time. So all these collaborative issues maybe itself is a niche at the same time.
Okay. We seem to have brought together a JV
Yeah.
here on the stage.
No, I mean, going back to the question of niches, yes. I mean, I like what the Malaysians have done with Islamic finance. I like what Singapore's done with asset management as well. Listen, you're gonna plain vanilla finance is gonna happen within your financial center anyways. Your typical bank, insurance company, asset management company, service, whatever financial services provider there is, that would remain as basically plain vanilla activities within any financial center. But yeah, 15 years into the experiment, we had to figure out what niches make sense going forward.
Correct.
I mean, you can't have basically two neighbors doing, for example, an asset management initiative and becoming two capitals for asset management in the MENA region half an hour away from each other. It's just not going to work. And I like what Farah said, you feed off of each other. A year ago, we've identified a niche that we think will work within financial services. That's Islamic finance. And again, we look at Malaysia, we look at Turkey, and we believe that Malaysia is a gateway into Asia for Islamic finance, and should be. It's a Muslim country, it has a huge Muslim population, and I don't think New York or Singapore or London is interested anymore, so somebody has to take this rapidly developing segment and run with it. And I think, a gateway into Asia, a gateway into Europe through Istanbul Financial Center, hopefully when they're up and running, and a gateway into the MENA. And if these financial centers basically sign some sort of agreement where they share technologies and allow passporting into those markets, then that's a niche. That's a niche. That's something that's never been done before. But again, there's a need for it. So this niche wasn't available in the KFC 10 years ago because our need was focusing back then on plain vanilla finance and attracting more companies and creating more high-skilled jobs. But like I said, 15 years into the experiment, we think Islamic finance on the financial side. But hear me out. Even on non-financial activities, we've created a niche because there's a need for it. We have the World Cup 2022 coming up in a year and a half.
Yeah.
And the only way you can set up a company as we speak today, 100% foreign ownership, without any bureaucracy, and as simple and as efficient as possible, is through the Qatar Financial Center. So we said, hey, listen, we'll do it for the state, on behalf of the state, and we'll create the entire value chain for the sports industry up to 2022. But that's a niche that's going to exist up and until that date. So, sports is a niche for us. Media is a niche for us as of recently. Digital and technology. None of this is financial services, but it contributes to the greater good, like I said. But these are niches that I think can develop and change in the future as well. So we've launched a couple of strategies, and this is our latest one, is to focus on Islamic finance and also develop areas and sectors which have nothing to do with financial services, but benefit the economy and feed into the narrative of the state of Qatar in terms of attracting foreign direct investment and becoming a more open environment before and up until the World Cup 2022. So yes, I think niches are important, but they tend to also develop and change into the future.
Okay. All right, I've got a couple of questions here. Any questions from the floor for our panel on anything we've covered so far? Anybody? No? All quiet? Oh, gentlemen right at the end there. If you shout, I don't know if we have any mics, but if you shout, I'll repeat. Oh, there is a mic.
I will directly pose my questions to the panelists, all of them. What I understood is that technology, digitalization, IT solutions are connecting people. But I don't think so that these technologies, digitalization, are not bringing and keeping people together. I think where finance can play very important role. So what kind of a business model this financial center have to bring the people together, keep the people together of different nations, not only in their centers, but somewhere, I don't know, digitally or in person. Because yes, we have this technology connecting us, but we are not working together, we are not producing together. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question. Do you want to pick that up? I mean, that's obviously quite a broad,
That's very broad, yeah.
question, and we've been talking about more technical
actually,
topics.
it resonates from the earlier speaker, you know, the keynote speaker,
Yes.
about, you know, creating soul, as it were, within financial services. I think that's what he was trying to say indirectly to us. I have an idea, actually, about this, because I've been thinking, ironically, about this a lot. And I think it's to do with financial inclusion. I think if you start looking at financial centers or international financial centers that reduce friction, and then you start putting the building blocks together. I have an 8-year-old son who has a lot of Lego, and invariably it morphs. And if you were to look at a situation where you take a structure and a solution, one of your solutions that you have, for example, and I'll talk about this in an example, if you allow me, because it's just easier to, well, for me anyway, to explain, maybe for you to digest. The situation where you have massive disparity between the haves and the have-nots, as we do in Asia. Asia, as you know, is booming, but there are so many less fortunate people in Asia that are maybe not as well taken care of, and they should be, because the aim of life is to elevate everyone, right? And if you look at the situation where people need micro-insurance, right, as an option of financial inclusion, or microcredit, and if you look at the digital element of it, so this is where it gets interesting, because you put the digital element that reduces the friction, you take the IFC, which also reduces the friction via your legal structure and your tax structure, and then you make sure that the players that you license have this mandate towards financial inclusion. That is an opportunity for us soulless people. Believe me, I worked in the capital market myself. Soulless, well, less human people in financial services, as they like to call us. I disagree completely, but there you go. To kind of give back a little bit, sir, to your question, to kind of bring people together a little bit, to kind of pay back in a way. So I think the element of a clear philosophical ethos vis-a-vis inclusion, using the lack of friction, the natural lack of friction within a financial center, and using technology. Now, this coming together is probably once in a lifetime. And if we in this room don't take this opportunity to kind of push it forward, I think we would have lost a fantastic opportunity. So in a way, I thank you for your question, because it's something that's been in my mind for the last 3 years, about trying to kind of make IFCs work in a more meaningful manner, yeah, as it were.
Let me narrow the scope down a little bit and then tie it to another question that I've got here from the panel for you, Serkan, which is that would it be feasible to have mutual recognition of licenses? So, for instance, a Malaysian financial services license, and have that recognized in Qatar, in Turkey, and vice versa. Is that something that you believe is achievable and is desirable? That might be a way for us to spread the connection between the different countries.
Thank you. That's a good question. First part, as I take note, mice. Desirable, it's definitely desirable. We have to desire it, because it's, as Mr. Yousuf has said, it's a niche to have a collaboration. So to have a legislative backbone that combining all financial centers together will be a niche thing. So definitely we are desiring for that. And the second part, achievable. We believe it's achievable because we are working on a master action plan for the Istanbul Finance Center project. it has huge legislative backgrounds. We are working closely with our friends and colleagues in our department, and it touches the banking regulation at the same time, financial service regulation, capital markets regulations. We are on the level to finalize that regulation, but that's a hard thing because we have to talk with all the players in the ground, so it's taking a lot of time because once the legislative framework regulation is out, changing it takes much more time. So we have to be really careful about what legislative backbone that we will have. And in that backbone, we are trying to put some mandates that will allow us to create collaborations between the centers.
I'd like to comment on that. I mean, you know, that's a phrase I'm very familiar with, mutual recognition, and I had to deal with that on a daily basis. And I'll give you one simple example. I mean, once upon a time, our banks in the Qatar Financial Center would be labeled offshore by all the local regulators, and they would basically prohibit any local company to basically do business with them. So a simple solution to that would be to lobby amongst the local regulators, including the central bank, to sign some sort of mutual recognition framework, which would allow our companies to freely access the local market. Now, you can replicate that not in one country, but amongst countries. And one example we're doing right now in Turkey is we're testing passporting on the non-regulated side. It's a bit complex when it comes to banks and financial institutions. But basically, we went to the Chambers of Commerce and told them, listen, if you can verify whatever Turkish company through your registry, so any Turkish company that is incorporated in Turkey and licensed in Turkey, let's take, for example, a law firm, we would endorse that incorporation and registration and license in the Qatar Financial Center and allow that company to access our market freely without the need to actually establish themselves all over again. So we would recognize and mirror their Turkish incorporation and just issue them instantly a Qatar Financial Center incorporation, allowing them to do business without even having an office.
Right.
And you might think that's, you know, anti basically the business environment and the status quo, but that business relationship could eventually turn into something big where this company would eventually put some people on the ground and contribute massively to the local economy. So that's one passporting example that can happen between two countries, and that's something we're testing as we speak. But I don't see why can't an entire financial center go into a mutual recognition framework with another financial center and allow, you know, freedom of trade and freedom of business access, just like you have in the European Union. I mean, if you're a bank in Frankfurt, I don't know how it's going to work out after the Brexit, but supposedly now, you can basically sell your products all across Europe.
Yeah.
Certain restrictions apply, but another example is we have basically an MOU with the Irish Central Bank to allow asset managers established in the Qatar Financial Center to sell their products into certain European destinations. Yeah. So passporting can be amazing. I mean, you can create, you know, increase trade flows, you can increase relations between nations, you can basically contribute massively to the development of you know, the business environment of both countries. So that's something, you know, we've tested, that's something we're working on, and we want it on a cross-border kind of arrangement with other countries. Like I said, we're testing it with Turkey, but I don't see why not we can't do it with Malaysia or any other country.
Okay.
No, but actually, just to add to that, what's interesting is that there won't be any regulatory arbitrage because everyone adheres to the same regulatory environment. It's a multilateral regulatory environment. So there isn't regulatory arbitrage. It's about really human contact and us talking to each other. Indeed. And understanding that the ethos is about growing and sharing and not trying to, you know, cut the other one up, as it were.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let me just expand a little bit on that point and something you said earlier, Yousuf, about having a virtual setup. And traditionally, of course, a financial center has been a physical thing. It's a special economic zone. If it's got separate tax regimes, separate legal regimes, it's physically demarked. And obviously, you've migrated now to this virtual structure with the multiple systems all happening at once. Do you think that's viable for Istanbul to start at the virtual end, or is it something that you can only move to over time, and you have to start with a physical, separate thing, and then build it out over time?
That's a very interesting question, because we did it because of a certain need. And our need back then was to develop the local market and hopefully integrate within the local market. And if you have physical boundaries, that's not going to work. It's just there's this perception that you're physically bounded within this territory, you're isolated from the country, and you're only allowed to do business within the boundaries. So we went away from day one with the boundaries because the need was to develop the local environment. Believe it or not, 15 years into the experiment now. It's 2005, 2019. It's been a long journey. But 15 years into the experiment, now we want to basically create the clusters all over again. Because we're done away with, the need. We've already, integrated into the local economy. The perception is that we're onshore. Everything in our legal frameworks and in the onshore legal environments testifies now that the Qatar Financial Center is an onshore environment. But we miss being clustered in this area where you have this ecosystem and this vibrant move and this social life where companies can interact with each other, and you have basically the social life element of a financial center. And believe it or not, we're not going to build anything. We figured out, what's the most suitable real estate project existing in the country that caters for that, and we're going to move into there. And hopefully, all these companies would follow their regulators, and we can create that cluster, but without the, the perception of yourself being independent from the rest of the country. So, we want the physical aspect, but we want to also be able to integrate with the local legal environment. So for us, it's a different need at the time. We believe that now is the time to create this financial city. So we're moving into this beautiful project downtown called Musharraf. It's ready built. We don't have to, hire contractors and build something from scratch. We're just moving in. We're still virtual because we're renting the space. We don't even own the space.
Right.
And hopefully all these companies would cluster around us, and then we can have this financial city. So I can't speak for Istanbul, but apparently they've built the hardware, which is the infrastructure. It's beautiful. I've visited that place a couple of times now. And the question is, what is their need after that? Is it just the physical aspect, or is it the software? And I think we're having very intellectual discussions on the topic. And they're reaching out to Malaysia, they're reaching out to us, and I think once they identify their need, they're going to have the same challenges we had. They're going to have the battles with the central bankers, they're going to have the battles with the Ministry of Finance, they're going to have the public perception, basically public perception against you basically importing international law and threatening the sovereignty of the nation. He's going to go through all that. And, there's a lot of interesting experiences we can share. So good luck with that, buddy.
So, Serkan, the next 10 years sound quite interesting if you're going to go down the same 15-year path. Did you wish you could go virtual from day one, or was it essential that you started from a physical thing and then worked out?
As far as we understand, with our discussions with the financial players, first we need a cluster zone, because we need a legislative basis. And the legislative basis will create boundaries for the subsidies. To be honest, we have to subsidize the incoming thing. As I said before, we are in charge in just in 1 year. So finance office has obtained, execution project responsibility is just 1 year. Even in 1 year, Istanbul has risen up 16 places in Global Financial Centers Index, but it's just start of the legislative issues, and that those legislative framework is designed to give subsidies, especially to the capital markets, because we have a huge banking industry, but our capital market share is below 15% of the GDP. We have to work on that. And in order to subsidize something, you have to define an area. And of course, we do understand anything that is not going to be digitalized will die off. So we have to have some virtual aspect of Istanbul Finance Center project at the same time. And on that regard, we are working with a cluster zone for financial techno park at the same time. So there is a construction going on for the cluster zone for the financial center, and we are also thinking about a financial techno park in another region, maybe. That can be a virtual thing, and the other it will be physical. So right now we have both of them, both aspects at the same time.
So, and Farah, you went with the sort of ultimate physical implementation of putting the whole thing on a separate island. So was that something you would do again if you were starting from scratch again?
No, no. I mean, in a way, originally we wanted to help Malaysian companies go out, but of course there was an issue of trying to grow the GDP of the island, and so they decided that we'll put it on an island, but actually it doesn't work. Actually, putting it on an island makes my job even harder, trying to explain that we are not an offshore center. Because we're part of Malaysia, it's one country, two systems. You know, the same anti-money laundering rules that apply onshore in Malaysia apply in Labuan. So yes, having it on this on an island helped in the beginning. But then what happened over the last years, the last maybe 10, 15 years, is that we've started to allow marketing officers in KL. We've started to allow now, as of 1st of January 2020, thanks to the OECD, you now can have a marketing office anywhere in Malaysia using the Offshore Financial Services Act. So what has happened is, again, it's an evolution, and it evolves over time, and most of the time I find that it is beyond your control. It is the supranational that comes in, and then you have to adjust. So even though we have the bulk of it in Labuan, there are so many marketing officers, there are so many physical presence onshore in Malaysia proper, whether it be all the way next to Singapore in Johor Bahru or all the way up in Penang. So the physicality of it has morphed, has changed.
Okay. All right, I think we've got time for, we can squeeze one more audience question in if anybody has one. I'll come back to you with another one. Right at the back there. Yeah, you're going to have to shout. Oh, there's a mic. You get.
Ve 21. yüzyılın İslam dünyasının 3 önemli ülkesinin temsilcileri karşımızda. Şimdi dijital dünya düzeni aslında aklın teslim olduğu bir çağ. Aklın teslim olduğu bir çağda kalp devre dışı kalmıştır. Kalp yok. Yani insanlık devre dışı kalmış. Dijitalleşen bir dünyada insanoğlu ızdırap çekiyor. Dolayısıyla küresel sermaye piyasaları anlamında 3 İslam ülkesinin ortaklığı kazançlarını yoksullaştırılmış halklarına acaba eşit ve adil nasıl paylaştıracak? Teşekkür ediyorum.
Maybe I need
I
to
think
translate
Serkan,
that
I think
question
we're going to have to
into
go to
English,
English.
and it's a hard question to translate at the same time. So basically, it's a general question. Maybe it's more philosophical question. So we are in an age of mentality, and we most of the time forget about our consciousness, our hearts, and humanitarian part of us. And when we talk about the global markets, global financial system is kind of a disruptive, and we are talking about here 3 representatives from Islamic countries in quotation marks, and trying to do Islamic finance, and he's saying that, you know, if we were able to find solutions for the humanity in general, because there are some tremendous aspects going on in the other countries, do we believe the finance will be helpful to, you know, overcome those problems? That's the question, and I may take the share to try to answer. That's a general question, but I think that question is not just related to the finance, but all the social structures in the modern life. So, I mean, the finance, as you know, it creates liquidity, and not just for the, you know, financial terms, but at the same time for the social structures. So peer-to-peer finance bringing the new horizons, but at the same time, with huge liquidity of the information, we try to question ourselves more. I mean, that might be an external effect, but I believe at some point of time, we will be talking more about humanitarian finance. I mean, as a matter of fact, I believe we share the mentality. When we talk about the Islamic finance, we don't say for the Islamic countries, because it will create, in some sense, the humanitarian understanding. For example, sustainability issues are on the agenda right now. So the green finance, the questions about the green finance is going upwards. So in sometimes, I mean, in some sense, I believe we will be dealing more humanitarian side of everything, not just finance.
Well, let me sort of pin down as to a round of question, which is what is the best way that a more efficient capital market can bring about improvements to the social infrastructure? We'll do that as an exit question.
That is a tough one because it is about intent. As Muslims, we know that it's about the niyat. It is about what you have in your heart. It is not about the structure. It is not about the solution. It's not about the legal system. It is how you look at something with the intention to create a better situation for everyone. So I don't think there's going to be a situation where, oh, finance is going to come like a superhero and change everything. No, it's never going to happen this way. For as long as there isn't the intention from all of us collectively to make it better. And that kind of transverses structures, solution, legal arbitrage, taxation issues, everything.
Okay. Yousuf, you would like a minute to encapsulate that very metaphysical question?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, look at all the unbanked population that's benefiting from microfinance, for example, in countries like Sri Lanka and Nepal. I mean, you just have millions of blue-collar labor who have no way to set up a bank account. They have no way of basically banking in any way, shape, or form. And today, through digital payments and mobile payments, you can simply basically access a digital account and a certain digital currency on your phone. So the industry is changing, and you're going to have a lot of and I think Islamic finance should play a big role in this. I mean, we've looked at green finance, of course, from an Islamic financial perspective. But I think, the technological advances and the innovation happening in the industry is probably going to disrupt certain elements of the industry, but it's also going to contribute to the greater good in terms of feeding into the unbanked population and basically having a more positive impact on society. And we're seeing some of that happening already. But I think, as Muslim countries, then we have also a religious duty to contribute to, green financing and social impact financing, and just, finance for the sake of the greater good.
Okay.
In whatever shape and form.
All right, we have to stop you there. That's been a fascinating canter, I think, through a wide range of topics around transformation of cities into financial centres. Please thank the panel for their time and thank you for attending. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, distinguished speakers. I'm going to kindly ask you to stay on the stage for a couple of seconds more because there was going to be a little certificate ceremony.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Bugünün anısına efendim öncelikle bu değerli konuşma için çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Bu toplantı için kendilerine hem Sayın Başkan hem konuşmacılara. Daha önce de duyurmuştuk efendim bugünün anısına katılımcılar için İzmir'de fidan dikildi ve bugün bir plaket yerine o dikilen fidanların sertifikaları verilecek kendilerine. İşte bugünün anısına kendileri adına İzmir'de dikilmiş fidanların sertifikalarını takdim etmek üzere Türkiye Sermaye Piyasaları Birliği Başkanı Sayın Doktor Alp Keller'i davet ediyoruz. Sayın Keller buyurun lütfen.
Okay. Thank you. This is my tree. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Exactly.
He's after you.
Oh. In English.
Benim memleket.
Ms. Crosby, there's going to be taken a photo.
I'm trying to.
Çok teşekkür ediyoruz efendim, sayın alkeyler, değerli katılımcılar, sayın başkan. Kıymetli misafirlerimiz,
very much.
oturumumuz sona
That's
ermiştir.
good
Bir
to see.
sonraki oturumumuz yaklaşık 10 dakika sonra bu salonda başlayacaktır. Topluma daha iyi hizmet eden bir finans endüstrisi yaratmak başlığıyla. Çok teşekkürler.